interesting mix here. I see
Sure do.
Allison and Warren.
Giuliani's in the back.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please take your seats. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're about ready to start. If you could please take your seats. So good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to our workshop to discuss rural land management planning. If you haven't had time to do so yet, if you could please silence your cell phone or turn it off, one or the other. If not, I'll have to charge you $5 and participate in your phone call. Anyway, with that said, we're happy to have you all here with us this afternoon, and we look forward to hearing the information that's going to be presented. If you could all stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, can we have roll call?
Yes, ma'am. Chairman Bryant?
Here.
Vice Chair Stone? Here. Commissioner Moore?
Here.
Commissioner Gold?
Here.
Commissioner Zalek?
Commissioner Zalek. All right.
I was
So
making
we're
sure it was
all
on.
present and accounted for. With that, we'll go ahead and get started this afternoon with our first presentation by Miss Busy Byerly.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Thank you so much for taking the time to hold this workshop about rural land management planning and for your interest in learning more about how it can benefit Marion County. So my name is Busy Shires Byerly, and I reside at 17733 Whiting Street in Micanopy, Florida, and I'm the program manager for the Horse Country Protection Program. This is a partnership project between the Equine Land Conservation Resource and the Alachua Conservation Trust. The American Farmland Trust is providing program support from a national level, and it's funded with private donations that are held in a separate fund at the Community Foundation for Ocala and Marion County. This project began about 2 years ago, this visioning the future of Marion County's farmland, after I was inspired by attending the Florida Chamber Foundation's town hall meeting in 2016. And it was sponsored by the Community Foundation and the Equine Alliance. And at the town hall meeting, the Florida Chamber Foundation presented their 2030 project and 2030 findings of their report. So one of the things that they talked about was that they predicted approximately 6 million new residents in Florida by the year 2030 and 150,000 in Marion County by the year 2030. So in 20 years, our population will increase to approximately 500,000 residents. And so the Chamber Foundation held town hall meetings in all 67 counties of Florida to address certain issues such as infrastructure, education, economic development, and quality of life. And the tagline of the 2030 project was, we need to do a better job planning for the next 6 million than we did for the previous 6 million. And they had a special town hall meeting that was focused exclusively on the equine industry here in Marion County to help the equine industry prepare for the growth that is coming. So being motivated by the Florida 2030 town hall meeting, we gathered the project partners together and secured funding, and we formed a planning committee at first. It was made up of a broad group of the equine industry and the agricultural industries. And this planning committee helped us reach out and provide input and advice to help us develop a leadership roundtable. And we held 2 meetings in May and July of this year, which were facilitated by the Equine Land Conservation Resource and the American Farmland Trust. It was a broad group of about 40 community leaders, including Mayor Ken Quinn, County Commissioner Michelle Stone, thank you so much for participating. Also included the Florida Thoroughbred Breeders and Owners Association, the Florida Thoroughbred Farm Managers, University of Florida IFAS, Farm Bureau, Farm Credit, Florida Horse Park, Horse Farms Forever, the Community Foundation. We also included staff from the Growth Services Department of both the city and the county, County Property Appraiser, Parks Department, the St. John's and the Southwest Florida Water Management Districts, as well as OMCAR, Ocala, CEP, Chamber Economic Partnership, Farm Tour Operators, and realtors and developers. So we worked really hard at creating a broad and diverse group to discuss some of the issues that Marion County was facing. At those meetings, we discussed the impact of urbanization on the horse and agricultural industries, as well as our natural resources in Marion County. We talked about the importance of the equine industry in Marion County, how important it is to our economy. We also talked about developing a long-range vision and plan to protect the county's rich agricultural heritage and industries. I included this map as a point of reference. I just wanted to point out a couple features on this map. So of course, the green is our Ocala National Forest, and then we have the greenway that comes through the southern part of Marion County. The turquoise line is the Ocala urban growth boundary. The red dotted line is our farmland protection area. And these two, looks like Marion County's lungs, almost. These are our springs protection areas. The dark yellow is our primary, and then the lighter yellow is the secondary springs protection zone this is Rainbow Springs, Silver Springs, and then Silver Glen and the Ocala National Forest. The orange areas are properties that have participated in Marion County's Transfer of Development Rights program. And one of the reasons I wanted to show this map was just talk about how important Marion County's mineral-rich water and soil is to our agricultural industry. This distinctive and rare soils provides optimal nutrition for the bones of growing horses, and which have made Marion County one of the top thoroughbred breeding areas in the world. And we all know that this soil only exists in certain areas of Marion County. It also only exists in certain areas of the world. It's a very precious natural resource. The springs, we also have 3 first magnitude springs, Rainbow, Silver, and Silver Glen. So some of the tools that Marion County has to protect our agricultural lands are the Farmland Protection Area and the TDR program. And I know that we're working through improving those programs through the current EAR process, through the comprehensive plan. So thank you so much for helping to improve those programs. But this rural land management plan is about all agricultural lands. It's not just about the farmland preservation area. So these blue lines below the city of Ocala, those are the county designated scenic roads. And then the Florida Horse Park is located here in the Cross Florida Greenway. This is also a very important agricultural area and equine industry. A lot of horse farms are here located because they want to participate in the trails. A lot of people go camping on the trails with their horses. So this is important equine industry south of Ocala. And we also have the Spar and Anthony areas, which is also an important agricultural area in Marion County. So as we move forward, we just want to make sure that we include not
Ms.
just
Byerly,
yes.
I have to ask you to stop for a minute. Sir, I'm
Okay.
going to have to ask you to take a seat. We can't have anybody standing during the workshops. Sorry. Just
Fire marshal.
Yeah, it's per the fire marshal. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. So throughout these meetings with the planning committee and the leadership roundtable, we also held an additional sort of our own town hall meeting at the Ocala Jockey Club in March of this year. And we had 150 horse people show up at 6 o'clock on Monday night, and there was a huge thunderstorm that evening. And you could see it, in the clubhouse at the Jockey Club looking down the hill. You could see the wind, these little mini tornadoes flying up the hill. And we still had 150 people show up at our meeting. We served Blue Highway pizza and beer, so we had a very good crowd.
You always bring out people.
That's right.
Here.
They just wanted to share their concerns about losing what we have here in Marion County. A lot of people have moved here to be part of this horse industry, and they were concerned about the loss that they've recently seen. So this is sort of the vision that we've sort of come to. We want to preserve our agricultural lands, protect the brand as the horse capital of the world, our water quality, our freshwater springs, our quality of life, and our vibrant urban core. And we came to a consensus at the Leadership Roundtable meeting that we would like to set in motion the creation of a plan, a rural land management plan, to plan for the future of agriculture in a rapidly growing community. So in my closing comments, I just want to say thank you again for holding this workshop. And thank you for taking the initiative to learn more about rural land management planning. And I feel like this is just the beginning of a long-term visioning and planning process for the community, but I hope that we are able to move forward with protecting our way of life that we have here in Marion County. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Byerly. All right, next, we're going to have Holly Groshek.
I do have one question, if I may, Madam Chair. Is it possible, I know what we have on the agenda that questions were going to be at the end. Throughout our presentations, would it be possible to hold questions until the end after everyone's presentations? Is that okay?
Well, if the commissioners would like to ask each
Okay.
presenter a question, it's usually better to go ahead and do it at that time
Okay.
while it's fresh in your mind.
That's fine.
So, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank Chair Bryant and the commissioners for the opportunity to join you today for this very important workshop on rural land management planning. My name is Holly Groshek. I am the Executive Director of Equine Land Conservation Resource. We are located at 4037 Ironworks Parkway, Lexington, Kentucky, 40511. What I've been asked to do today to get us started is to provide some economic impact data for the equine industries and agriculture industries to remind us how important those sectors are here in Kentucky, or here in Marion County. But before I get started, I'd like to quickly introduce my organization for those of you that are not familiar with Equine Land Conservation Resource. ELCR was started about 18 years ago by leaders in the equine industry that recognize the loss of land as one of the key threats to our equine industry, heritage, and culture in the United States. Our mission is to lead in the protection of land for horses and horse-related activities, and we fulfill that mission by providing educational resources and consulting and technical assistance services to individuals, organizations, and communities that are working with horse land-related issues within their local communities. Before I share the economic impact data with you, I think I'd be remiss to not touch upon the other benefits that our horse and agriculture lands bring to our communities. I think it would be hard for us to argue with the quote from Alice Walker, Pulitzer Prize winner, "Horses make a landscape look beautiful," that's on the screen. In the case of Marion County, I think it's more important to say horses make a beautiful landscape even more spectacular. But what other benefits do our horse and agriculture lands bring to our communities? To answer that question, I have a short educational video that our organization produced as part of an educational exhibit at the International Museum of the Horse entitled "Losing Ground, Our Greatest Threat."
Horses are part of the American landscape. We see them in rolling green pastures, on the open range, and in backyards. But the open landscape that supports horses in America is diminishing. What if the land where horses graze, where we ride and drive and race them, where the stables, the trails, and the horse parks are, were suddenly and permanently replaced by development? America is losing 6,000 acres of open lands every single day. Why does this matter? What makes horses and horse lands good for us and for our communities?
The human need to touch into the agricultural side of the equation is becoming more and more important in this very, very fast-moving world. We have to protect the land that we were given. Land is a finite thing, and this is something that we will never be able to go back if we end up misusing it.
Horses and horse activities contribute to our lifestyle in a variety of important ways. Open land is important to our environment. Horse land helps to control and filter stormwater. Vegetation helps protect the soil and cool the air. Horses contribute to our physical health and well-being by taking us out into nature and giving us fun and exercise. Horses bring jobs and income to our communities. Horses and horse lands help visitors enjoy our communities more. But horses can't give us these benefits without the land to support them. How can we protect our horse lands? You can be part of the solution. Join a horse organization. Be a voice in community planning. Make your community horse-friendly. Support land conservation and funding for trails. Volunteer your time. Equine Land Conservation Resource can help you to advocate for horses in your community. It's something we need to do for the future of our young riders.
Hang on, we're stuck. There we go. Thank you. So as you can see, there's a lot of benefits from our horse lands, which also carry over to open agricultural lands that often go unnoticed in our communities. But probably the most visible benefit that we're all aware of is the economic impact. So I want to look at economic impact statistics for both agriculture and the horse industries here in Marion County. This first slide that I'm sharing with you is from a 2016 report by the University of Florida, IFAS. And it talks about the economic impact of agriculture and related industries in Marion County. So what does that report tell us? $3.23 billion in revenues is the economic impact total of agriculture and related industries in Marion County, which is significant. When we look at job impact, over 33,740 jobs in Marion County, which is almost 25% of the workforce that can owe their jobs to the agriculture sector. And for every dollar invested in agriculture research, there is a return of $20 to the community. So these are some important economic statistics. So what else do we know about agriculture? Let's look at there we go. This is one additional slide that provides more economic impact data for the equine industry in particular. There's a lot of numbers on the screen, so thank you. So let me take you through these numbers. This column on the left-hand side are the National Equine Economic Impact data. This is from a 2017 report done by the American Horse Council. The second column here are state impacts for the equine industry done by the same study, American Horse Council, in partnership with the Florida Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association. And the last column are Marion County statistics done by a report from Ocala-Marion County Chamber and Economic Partnership. So if we go back and look at the first economic impact, this is number of horses in the U.S. According to the 2017 study, we have over 7,247,000 horses in the United States, which sounds like a significant number. It is. In terms of population of horses, the U.S. ranks #1 in the nation, or in the world. But these numbers have fallen dramatically. In the same study conducted by the American Horse Council in 2006, the number of horses were 9.2 million. If we look at Florida, Florida has over 387,000 horses, and Marion County, 50,000 horses. The interesting thing about this number is the number of breeds represented here in Marion County. When I looked at the study, I was very much intrigued that we think about the American Thoroughbred when we look at Ocala or Marion County, but that is only one breed of 59 different breeds in one county. So that's truly amazing, the diversity in the equine industry here in Marion County. If we look at economic impact in terms of dollars, at the national level, the equine industry has a $122 billion economic impact. The state of Florida, significant $6.8 billion. Marion County, amazingly, $2.62 billion. That's about a third of the state's economic impact, so congratulations, that's really phenomenal. Then we look down at jobs. At the national level, 1,744,000 plus jobs from the equine industry. Florida, over 73,000 jobs. And then Marion County, over 19,000 jobs. This next slide summarizes the previous slide. So what do we know from these economic impact studies? Well, Florida is the third largest state in terms of number of horses behind California and Texas. But when you look at the size of those other states, California and Texas, in terms of land mass, it's very impressive. And maybe if we looked at horses per acre, Florida would rank even higher. Also, Marion County represents over 38% of the total equine economic impact for the state of Florida. That's phenomenal. One county representing almost 40% of the economic impact for the state. Marion County also represents over 26% of all equine industry jobs in the state. Really important numbers. And this is my final slide for economic impact. This was taken from the study from the Marion County Ocala Chamber and Economic Partnership. It's really a great study. If anybody has not seen that study, I encourage you to look at it. It's really chock full of so much great information about the equine industry in Marion County and comparing it to the national equine industry. This slide compares the socioeconomic status of the out-of-town visitors for equine events such as the Ocala Breeders' Sale and the HITS show series. And it compares those out-of-town visitors to other out-of-town visitors for other regional large-scale events, such as the University of Florida, Miami Dolphins, and Florida State football. And I'm sure we have a lot of football fans with us here today, but I hope after we go over this slide, we're also going to have some equine sports fans as well. So when we look at these visitors that come for these equine events and compare them to visitors for the other out-of-town regional events, what we do know is the equine visitors have a higher household income. For example, the average household income for a HITS out-of-town visitor is $223,000, which is in the top 3% at the national level. That's really incredible. And because they have higher income, higher earning opportunities, they also have greater disposable income. So that translates into higher per diem expenses. OBS and HITS Ocala visitors, their average daily expenditures are 3 to 4 times higher than typical visitors in the region. And lastly, they come here more often and they stay longer during their visits. In summary, equine visitors to your area have higher incomes, they have greater disposable incomes, they spend 3 to 4 times higher amounts when they're here, they come more often, and they stay longer. This is obviously great economic impact data for the community. And reading this report, it hinted that probably there's a lot more business opportunities that have not yet even been realized to cater to these equine visitors to the community. And so in summary, I think we can say that the agriculture and equine industries directly impact the scenic landscapes, rural heritage, and the brand that we're so aware and love of Marion County. And I have to say, from an organizational perspective, we are not anti-growth, but we strongly advocate good, sound planning and management of growth and planning in our communities. And from also a national perspective, what we see when communities are challenged with future growth and trying to contain or manage their rural brand, those that really have invested in rural land management planning stand for a better future and being able to balance that growth with retaining their rural heritage and all the benefits that those rural parts bring to their community. So I want to thank you once again for the opportunity to be here with you today for this important program.
Thank you so much. I think that we've all heard a lot of that information a lot. Most of us in here are very in tune to our equine community and especially what happens with the different events that we have going on in our community. And our community is very thankful that we have the venues and able to have those, and that we also have our, not just our equine industry, but our agricultural industry here as well. So thank you for those reminders.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Steve, any questions? Commissioner Stone?
Well, Holly, if you don't mind, can you tell us specifically what does Equine Land and Conservation Resource, I mean, where does your funding come from, and what specifically do you all do?
We're a nonprofit organization. Our fundings come from grants, contributions, and some fee-for-services as well. And we really are an educational resource-based organization. So we have the greatest collection of information on our online resource library that anyone can find in terms of managing and protecting horse lands. And we really have become the national authority on protecting horse lands in the United States. So we're one of the first resources the equine community goes to when they're trying to look at these issues in their local communities in terms of protecting horse lands.
So the process, I mean, to get more detailed information from your group is either you become a member, or are you able to access your materials?
All
for a fee?
our materials and our resource library is open to the public and free, no service fees involved at all.
Okay. Okay, great.
And basic technical assistance questions we answer on the phone. We try to be a great resource as we can to the equine community. Obviously, when we get into more in-depth projects, we do a fee for service, but we generally, there's subsidized fees as well.
Okay, great.
Okay?
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you so much.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
All right. Next up, we're going to have Tom Kay for a summary of our federal, state, and local land conservation programs.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I appreciate this opportunity. My name is Tom Kay. I'm the Executive Director of Alachua Conservation Trust. My address is 6850 Northwest 207th Place in McIntosh, Florida. I'm going to give you a sort of a brief overview of what the local and more so the state and federal programs are for conservation right now that are available. And I'll start off with just a little bit about what our organization is. And I'm not exactly lost being here from Alachua Conservation Trust. Our organization actually works in 16 counties across north central Florida, and that's our primary working zone. I actually have projects right now in Okaloosa County and one down in Monroe County. So we're spread pretty far out. We're the second oldest local land conservation organization in the state of Florida. We're celebrating 30 years this year. We've conserved over 50,000 acres, directly purchased over 19,000 acres, and we've got another 3,600 acres, more or less, in conservation easements. And that's basically what I'm going to be focusing today on, is talking about conservation easements and the programs that are available through that, and how those might play into a rural land management program. You saw earlier in Busy's part of her presentation had the TDR program, the Transfer Development Rights Program, and that is, in essence, a little bit like a conservation easement program. But the concept there is a land staying in private ownership, so it continues to be agricultural lands or timberlands or just natural areas, but you're giving up the development rights on those properties. And so that's certainly one potential program for Marion County. There's not a tremendous amount of easements in Marion County, but there are a few, and there's some in the programs that I'll be talking about today. And I want to just touch base on this. I think in all these presentations, one thing that comes across all of these is, the economic benefits of the equine industry in our rural areas, our agricultural lands. But one term I think, regardless of what publication you're looking in, whether I'm an attorney as well, whether it's the Florida Bar, or the Chamber of Commerce publication, or a conservation publication coming from any one of our entities behind me or myself, they all talk about quality of life. And I think one of the things with conservation or doing planning like this is it ultimately leads us to what, quality of life. And I really like this definition of it. It talks about the general well-being of individuals and societies, both negative and positive. And it's the observation of life satisfaction, including physical health, family, education, employment, wealth, safety, security or freedom, religious beliefs, and environment. I think it's fair to say when you get in this season of the year, I was just at the 1890s Festival in McIntosh, we're going to continue having festivals all year. I think I saw Mr. Feaster here. He was part of those festivities, and that is a big part of what is really at the heart of Marion County for me, and why my wife and I ultimately came back here and moved on to a farm. So, I think that's one of the benefits of trying to do this kind of planning, is to ensure that the quality of life that's drawing people here and keeping people here continues to be really high. Hopefully. I hope I didn't hit the wrong button there. There we go. So I want to just start off with I'm going to do sort of a 30,000 foot level, because these programs are pretty detailed, but the options in Florida. So as we know, there was for a number of years, we've had some incredible programs for conservation in the state of Florida. Those were sort of renewed with the passage of Amendment 1 in 2014 with the Florida Water and Land Legacy Program, which is the dock stamp that funded Florida Forever. That's a 30% of every dock stamp collected going towards programs in the Florida Forever program. And among those programs is a Rural and Family Lands program, which falls under the Florida Forest Service, which of course falls under the Florida Department of Agricultural and Consumer Services, and also the Florida Forever program, which has a program for protecting agricultural and rural lands through its less than fee projects. And so I'll start off with the Rural and Family Lands Program. That was created in 2001. Its funding also falls under that Florida Forever. This year, in 2018, the budget was $100.8 million for Florida Forever. $6 million of that was designated for Rural and Family Lands. There is somewhere in the neighborhood of, I believe, like over 100 projects right now in the Rural and Family Lands Program. And on that list, there's four projects from Marion County. And what Rural and Family Lands' focus is on conservation easements for active and working conservation land, or I'm sorry, active and working agricultural lands and farms. But the primary focus there ultimately is working lands and keeping and working lands. So it's trying to protect the most valuable agricultural lands in an area, and trying to continue to have and follow the best management practices on those, so sustainable agriculture on those properties, and then protecting environmental benefits and water resources. But the primary focus of that program really is ultimately trying to protect agricultural working lands with that program. And that's the highest priority there. And so that program, there's a lot of people trying to push for additional funding for that. The hope is ultimately to try to get the Florida Forever program up to where it was before the Great Recession in 2009, back to that $300 million amount. There's a lot of groups pushing for as much as $100 million in the program. But ultimately, those lands will stay in conservation. It helps protect those family lands, especially those that have been in families for generations and generations, and provide some stability, avoid some estate issues potentially down the line, and keep it as working active lands, and take away the development pressure. So with those easements, you're taking away the development rights. In a lot of cases, they're taking away, say, mining or the ability to subdivide some of this property beyond, putting some additional structures on there for family farming buildings. That program goes through a list that goes up to the state of Florida in Tallahassee. There's a 5-member committee that decides and ranks them. There's 3 different tiers, and they kind of work down that list depending on how much funding they have and who's ready to make a deal on those. I note too that with these programs, you have the ability to join them. So you'll see a lot of projects that are both on, say, the Rural and Family Lands Program, they may be on the Florida Forever list, and they may be on some of the federal ones I'm going to talk as well. So the way these ultimately work is, in the best case scenario, is that there's multiple funding sources to make these things happen, make these projects happen, because they've got sort of match requirements with some of them. So if you've got a local funding source, if you've got a state funding source, or you've got a federal program that can come together, the project has a better chance of succeeding.
Mr. Kay, I'm going to have to ask you, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to take a seat as well. I had to ask somebody else. We can't have, Fire Marshal prohibits us from having anyone standing at our meetings. Sorry.
That's okay. And so, as I said, Rural and Family Lands is really focused on the ag side of things. With the Florida Forever program, it's much more focused on protecting wildlife, the natural resources, plants, and the general ecosystems as a whole. So you'll see projects on both of those. The focus is a little bit different. The conservation easement for those is a little bit more stringent. But you'll also see projects on both those lists. Here in Marion County right now, there's only one project on the less than fee project list for that. Those projects go to Tallahassee every year. The Acquisition and Restoration Council, which is also, I think they're appointed by the governor, that list, they take it every year, they'll be happening, I think it just happened. They re-rank the projects, and right now there's about 23 properties on that less than fee project list. But the one here in Marion County is Mill Creek, and that's part of the Greenway. It's about 440 acres. It's pretty low on there. You know, part of that's because of the project size being relatively small by their standards, and another part is, you know, how much funding there is to potentially match that and make that project go forward. Going into, and I should note with conservation easements, I don't know how everyone's general knowledge of these, but basically what it is, you have a landowner that has their piece of property, and then you have to have a qualified entity to hold the conservation easement, hold those development rights, and every other kind of rights that they're giving up with those. And that typically has to be a municipality, the state government, or a nonprofit organization that's qualified to do that, like myself, Alachua Conservation Trust, American Farmland Trust. I think Holly's group can do that as well. But you need to have a separate entity that's holding that conservation easement, and then they're enforcing that conservation easement by going out once a year, at least once a year, and ensuring that the project is being maintained the way it's supposed to be, and that there hasn't been anything done per the conservation easement that wasn't supposed to be done. So I think that's an important point to make with conservation easements. And I'll get to the federal conservation programs here relatively quickly. So the U.S. Department of Agriculture, through the Natural Resources Conservation Service, has a number of ag programs, conservation easement programs available for landowners. Similar to, but a little bit different. Each one's a little bit different than what we have on a state level. So there's the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program. That's sort of the broad umbrella for these programs. And there's a number of federal programs, but these are sort of the three most common ones. The Wetland Reserve Easement Program, the Agricultural Land Easement Program, and the Healthy Forest Reserve Program. The Wetland Reserve Easement Program is, as it probably sounds, it's focused mainly on doing easements on properties, protecting wetlands, enhancing wetlands, restoring wetlands, and protecting those. An interesting thing about those is conservation easements typically are in perpetuity. That means forever. So if you sign this agreement, that it runs for the length of time. Doesn't matter if the land ownership changes. That easement runs with the land, stays with it. The Wetland Reserve Program, the way they do that, all these programs are sort of paying you for that conservation easement. They have both one for in perpetuity, and they also have one for a term of years. And so depending on which program you sign up with, you can either sign up for a term of years or one that's in perpetuity. And the interesting thing with their program is they can pay up to 100% of the value of the conservation easement. So say a property is worth $1 million, they decide the easement's worth $500,000. That's the fair market value of the property, not the adjusted value of the property, but the actual fair market of the value. They can pay up to 100% of that 50% of that market, so up to $500,000, assuming they have the funding in their budget to do that. In some programs, that's not the case. They can't fund the full amount. You have to come up with funding from other sources to meet that dollar amount. And so that program, again, is sort of predominantly focused on wetlands, on agricultural lands, and in some cases, natural lands. The second program is the Agricultural Land Easement Program, or ALE. That's really more focused on grasslands. You'll see that on cattle lands. We do not have a whole lot of those up in this area. The focus with those programs is further south, down in the east, around like Lake Okeechobee in that area.
Is that because of the size?
Size, and historically they've just been able to pull the fundings. Even Rural and Family Lands Program, there's been 7 of those in the state of Florida, and almost all of them been in South Florida. Part of that's funding sources, and part of it they've just been good at getting those, and they've been pretty large farms down there.
What's the minimum acreage requirement?
So for any farm for a conservation easement, traditionally is at least 40 acres. But when you're looking at some of these projects right now, the ones that are competitive in these programs are 4,000 plus acres. I noted with the Rural and Family Lands Program that there's 4 active ones here in Marion County, and some of those are as large as 13,000 acres. So we have some big tracts of land that are on that list. It's just a matter of getting the funding all lined up to make that viable. ALE is interesting in that they can really only pay up to 50% of that value. So if you use that same hypothetical I used at say $1 million piece of property, and the easement's worth $5 million, they would only pay 50% of it. Now a landowner, if they wanted to kick in up to 25% of that, so if they want to donate 25% of that, they can do that, and there's tax benefits from that. they can, but then there's still 25% that has to be made up. And so that's why you'll see a lot of times landowners trying to pair programs from a federal program with a state program, and if there's a local program, matching those funds so they can tie in and get some of these funds from the federal government. And that's sort of the other kind of trick with these things, is you kind of need to have some other funding sources to make them viable, because a landowner can't just make up that difference of 50%. Someone else has to kick in at least a portion of the other funds to pay for that entire conservation easement. And part of that is overall USDA is looking for partnerships. I mean, if you looked at their website and you go to their page, you'll see that a big focus of what they're ultimately trying to do with these programs is create partnerships with different agencies, with different organizations to fund these things and ultimately preserve and conserve agricultural lands, not only here in Florida but across the U.S. And I'll just touch base on the last one real quick. I'm not aware of any of these programs in the state of Florida, but we do have a lot of timberlands here in Marion County. It's the Healthy Forest Reserve Program, and that program is really geared toward timberlands, so lands that have active timber production on there. And the focus of that program is really for endangered species, which we definitely have here, endangered and threatened species. And those programs for that one is not in perpetuity. It's usually they're either a 10-year or 30-year agreement, but they're binding agreements that a landowner enters into to help sort of do restoration on the properties, restore ground cover, bring important parts of restoration back to those lands, like including things like fire or management of invasive species through that program. But that is another program. It's technically considered an easement because it is tying up the property and taking away certain rights on the property for a number of years, but it is not in perpetuity. So as I just sort of wrap up, I think that my point of touching base on each one of these programs is, as we're thinking about the concept of a rural and land management plan for Marion County, thinking about what funding sources are out there and what tools we might want to have, in that basket to maybe capture some of those or become a better candidate for our landowners here to receive funds from the program is an important thing to take into consideration as we're making that plan going forward. And I certainly appreciate you taking the time to allow me to address you today.
Thank you, Mr. Kay. Commissioners, any questions?
I have just one. I may have missed it. And thank you very much for the great overview, but on the federal conservation options, I know you were aware of the state projects that we had, the 4 state projects. Were there any in Marion County in the federal plan?
I am not aware of any of them on the federal program right now. Like, as I said, most of the ones I'm aware of have been further south, yeah. Okay. And they're, it's part of it's getting applied. I know that there's a couple people in Levy and Alachua County that have been putting in or have put applications in, but I'm not aware of a landowner right now in Marion County that has one in.
Yeah, and I know of a landowner in Dunellen that just went through the state process last session, so.
Great,
yeah.
Great.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, next we will have Billy Van Pelt to discuss a rural land management plan.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, I'm Billy Van Pelt with American Farmland Trust. The address is 1150 Connecticut Avenue Northwest, number 600, Washington, D.C. 20036. Thank you for allowing me to be here today and to participate in this program. Each of you have a copy of our annual report at your place for more information. So I think we're going to show a short video. Mine is shorter than Holly's.
I'm timing you.
The United States is blessed with some of the richest farmland and ranch land in the world. This land grows our food, supports our rural communities, and contributes $1 trillion a year to our economy. Well-managed farmland controls floods, suppresses fires, and protects our water and wildlife. And farmland provides a unique tool to combat climate change, a way to sequester carbon through natural means that improve soil health. Our future depends on having enough farmland to both feed us and to restore our planet. Yet our farmland is disappearing. We're losing it to expanding cities and suburbs and to single-family homes built on large lots in rural areas. In 20 years, we've lost 31 million acres, as much farmland as exists in the entire state of Iowa. That's twice the amount previously thought. That's 3 acres a minute, and the loss is irreversible. But there's hope. Since 1980, American Farmland Trust has led a movement of agricultural land trusts and state programs that have together saved 6.5 million acres. Clearly, much more is needed, but the tools are now in place to do more. With your help, we can save the land that sustains us. Learn more about our farms under threat and join the cause.
That was very short. Direct and to the point.
Hope is on the way.
Okay. Most of you may probably know us. You've seen our bumper sticker, but you're not familiar with our organization. As the video said, we were started in 1980. We're almost 40 years old. Peggy Rockefeller, our founder, was serving on the board of the Nature Conservancy, and she thought that they should do more to save farmland and help farmers. And at that point in time, TNC said, well, we don't do that. So Peggy started American Farmland Trust. And so we are a nonpartisan science and research think tank to provide resources for conversations such as the ones that we're having today. So we really created the agricultural conservation movement and ag easements as a viable tool, and created the funding program that Tom was speaking of a few minutes ago, created state programs and private land trust across the United States, and advanced smart growth for agriculture. And that's really why we're here today. We're talking about planning for the future of agriculture that incorporates growth and agriculture at the same time. We wrote the first conservation title, and we've improved farming practices on over 10,000 farms. We are losing 175 acres an hour. I think I shared our Farms Under Threat maybe in an executive summary format in the last meeting, but that is available on our website, and we are mapping all of the remaining farmland in the entire United States at the quarter-acre scale, and this is a digital project that we will share with everyone. So we are looking at the most productive, versatile, and resilient farmland across the United States. So we've already rolled out the national results, and now we're going to be rolling out the statewide results starting in May, and then we will drill down to the county level. So we will have the ag productivity as a nation, the ag productivity by state, and the ag productivity by the counties in each state. So ultimately, we will show where these PVR lands are here in Marion County, along with all the other counties in the U.S. But you know, it's not only about conservation; it's about how we farm. It's great that you're conserving land, but you also have to make sure that you're being a good steward of the soil. And we also work very strongly on getting our next generation on the land. We talked about the Farms Under Threat, which is available on our website. I'll share that information in a few minutes. Revitalizing and reinvesting in state farmland protection programs, building and supporting local capacity for permanent protection and better land use planning, and filling critical voids with projects of our own. Advancing conservation cropping systems that improve water quality and soil health. Those two things go hand in glove. Women for the Land, this is a huge initiative of AFT's. Women now own over a third of the farmland in the U.S. They own over 300 million acres, and that number is growing every day. We have about 1 billion acres of farmland in the U.S., and women now own over a third. And of course, climate change is part of that conversation with our soils. The next generation, getting the next generation on the land, we have assistance programs around the country where we're training trainers to teach these programs in their own communities. So how to plan for the future of agriculture. These are broad concepts that are on our website. So American Farmland Trust website for you and for the audience is farmland.org. But we have a separate website called farmlandinfo.org, which is a clearinghouse of all of our work. It's a clearinghouse of all of our research, so everything we do is publicly available, and you can search by state or by area of interest. So just generally, planning for the future of agriculture, some of these things are implicit because we know who these folks are here locally. Determining the planning authority, defining what agriculture is for you, engaging stakeholders. You're doing that, and Busy is doing that, mapping important resources, and creating a vision and setting goals. And I've included a link to this information on our website. But why to plan for the future of agriculture? So it's not just about conservation. You've heard brand identity mentioned today. Holly talked about the economic impacts of planning for the future of agriculture, but there are also environmental considerations, your own physical considerations. Food production, as a nation, we will have to increase our agricultural output by 70% by the year 2050 to feed ourselves. It's a big issue. Scenic and recreational reasons, certainly. This is my 6th trip to Marion County, and I've had the opportunity to tour your 377,000 acres of rural area in a private vehicle as well as in a tour van, and you have a stunning rural landscape. It is really amazing, and it's quite something to see. So what would a plan for the future of agriculture include in Ocala, Marion County? Some of these things may seem straightforward. Promoting compact urban growth where you're growing in a compact, contiguous manner, a community-centered growth, accommodating a variety of housing opportunities for people, where people want to live. You know, the trends are showing that people want to be in more walkable, bikeable communities where they have access to health care and recreation and culture, and to also preserve agricultural land and encourage agricultural diversity. So horses, cattle, and in my neck of the woods, industrial hemp is certainly coming back online. Utilizing environmental criteria in order to locate rural growth and guide urban growth. Accommodating this growth in a rational manner based on where services are available and where you can reasonably provide services. Cost of community services. AFT has done over 70 COCS studies across the nation. They all say the same thing. And they're sort of a look backwards, but we're developing one that looks forwards to not only look at what the cost is going to be to provide those services today, but we're working on a study that will show what the cost will be going forward. So generally, sprawl in the traditional sense is using anywhere from $1.60 to $1.70 in services for every dollar it pays in taxes. So it's using more in services than it's paying in taxes. Your ag areas are only using 70 to 80 cents in services for every dollar they pay. And if in your core commercial and urban areas where you're very close to the urban center, you're only using about a quarter for every dollar that you're paying in taxes. So you can see staying in that compact, contiguous manner and just growing in a compact way. And we know we're going to grow, and AFT is also not an anti-growth organization. This isn't our tagline, but I'll borrow it from another organization. It's not a matter of if you're going to grow, it's a matter of when, where, and how. And planning for the future of agriculture is part of that conversation. These are straightforward: planning for an open space program in and around cities and conserving environmental values and public access. So to be more specific, we've gone out from the big picture to we're drilling down into the rural land management plan. And this link that I have here to cite this as a reference is the rural land management plan that exists for Lexington-Fayette County. And these are some of the things that Lexington looked at. The Lexington rural area is only a third of the size of your rural area. Your rural area here in Marion County is 3 times the size of the rural area in Lexington. And that's why your your equine economic impact numbers eclipse Lexington's equine economic impact numbers. You have a bigger industry here. So you're looking at the history of the rural area, the importance of the ag economy, challenges to rural preservation, current trends in the rural area, and you're incorporating these as goals and objectives in your comprehensive planning process. So ideally, a rural land management plan would be adopted as part of that comprehensive plan process. And it's something that would be revisited and revised. It would be a living, breathing document, just like your comp plan. Not only historic, but also your cultural and rural heritage from every aspect. Transportation is certainly one of those discussions for the rural area. Tourism, the equine industry, as well as general agriculture. I've had the opportunity to meet with your general ag folks here in Marion County. Your general ag numbers are up there, I think 1.4 billion. It's also a very high number, and it's a very diverse base that makes up that number. And an intentional focus. So if you think about all the effort that goes into a planning document that's focused on your urban area, a rural land management plan would put the same amount of focus on your rural area. So other examples, Commissioner Stone, in prior meetings, you've asked me to mention other communities that have engaged in rural planning as a way to protect their identity, their economic base, who they are. And those communities include, you know, AFT did not invent this. We created the ag conservation movement, but communities all over the country have been doing rural land planning for years, for decades. And some of those areas include Napa County, California, Sonoma County, California, Marin County, California, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, Charleston County, South Carolina, and again, Lexington, Fayette County, Kentucky, those to name a few. So my professional training is I'm a landscape architect. I was in the private sector for many years, and have approached planning from every side, from commercial, institutional, and from the rural area. And it all boils down to looking at your rural planning as a way for you to diversify your economic development portfolio that you have here. So your rural area is part of that economic development portfolio. That's what we've been talking about. So how do you plan for the future of that? Clearly, you have the A team here with your chamber, with Kevin and Louisa being so knowledgeable about the equine community, but developing a rural land plan, not only from the planning side for all the reasons that we've discussed here, but to also really focus in on your agribusinesses and your agritourism and the cluster effect of those businesses. And I think we don't need to go into that any further, but I will say that just to list a few of the economic statistics in other places, Woodford County, Kentucky, where Justify and American Pharoah are standing, our two latest Triple Crown winners, which is just west of Lexington. That's a small county of 25,000 people. Ag and equine is providing 1 out of every 3 jobs and $565 million a year in economic activity, just in a county like that, $565 million. And so that is from an economic impact study that the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture did. 1 out of every 3 jobs, $565 million in a county of 25,000. Fayette, Lexington, which is the smaller economic impact when compared to Marion, $2.4 billion a year, 1 out of every 12 jobs. So as you go forward in this conversation, I would just offer some encouragement and say, look at this through the lens of economic development. Look at this through the lens of your Convention and Visitors Bureau. Visit Lex is the Convention and Visitors Bureau in Lexington. Look at the imagery there. Look at all of the tourism things that revolve around the rural area. Local food, farm to table, bourbon, craft breweries, the wine industry. And think about incorporating how all those things might tie into this plan for the future of the rural area. So that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Van Pelt. Commissioners, any questions?
All I can think of at the moment.
I'm going to turn it back over to Busy.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Thank you so much for taking the time today to learn more about rural land management planning and how it can benefit Marion County. So that concludes the day. So are there any additional questions you wanted to ask about from the other team members?
Any other questions? No. So if there's no other questions, I'll just go ahead and say
Okay.
this. I mean, I think that I know that there's not a commissioner sitting on this dais that doesn't understand the importance of our equine and agricultural industry in Marion County. That is why you saw us come out so vehemently strong and in opposition to one of the biggest threats we've had to both of those industries in our community since I can remember, and I've been here all of my life, and that's the Coastal Connector. If you aren't aware of this, then you've been sleeping under a rock for the last 7, 8, probably the last year. But you know, we just came through an election cycle here. We're finishing it in November, and quite frequently on the campaign trail. And I've made that statement. I think in some of the forums, I was asked what I thought the biggest threat, or what was going to be the biggest challenge facing Marion County in the coming years. And let me just reiterate, for those of you who don't know, I was born and raised here. This is where I've been my whole life, so I've seen a lot of things change. I can remember when the mall was built, and I can remember when State Road 200 was a 2-lane road, and the only time we got on it was we went out to Kingsland Country, and probably with some boys and some trucks to ride around out there. So, you know, what I was asked, you know, what did I think was going to be one of the biggest challenges for Marion County moving forward, and it was touched upon in this presentation. And that is the fact that by the year 2040, we're expected to have a population of over 525,000 people. We sit right at around 350,000 right now. And while there have been some that have suggested just shut the gate, unfortunately it doesn't work that way. So we have to be better at what we do when it comes to planning and planning for growth. We don't want to see sprawl in our community. It's why this commission at this time is in a lawsuit. The county attorney would, if he were here, he'd probably tell me hush. But you know, we're very cognizant of what's going on in our community. And I don't think there's a person sitting in this room that wants to see any of the beauty of Marion County gone. We are going to have some challenges that we are going to have to face, and planning for the growth that's coming our way is going to be extremely important. I know that we've all learned a lot here today, and we're each going to take that with us and think upon that. And I know that there have already been some discussions with our with Sam over in our growth management department, and also there will be discussions with our LDRC. And then we have some other things that we'll be working on as well. So I say that all to you to let you know that we're aware of this, very much so. I think the one thing that the Coastal Connector did was it made everyone in our community wake up to the threats that are out there and the importance of the things that we don't want to lose. So with that said, I want to thank you all for being here with us today. Busy, I want to thank you, and I'm going to have to go back here so I can remember everybody's name. Ms. Groshek, Mr. Kay, and Mr. Van Pelt, thank you all for coming in today and with your presentations. And before we leave, I want to leave you all with something that I'm thinking you might not have seen yet. So just to reiterate the fact that we realize how important our equine and agricultural community is to Marion County. Recently, we approved some gateway signage that's going to be on I-75. And I want to show you what we chose to showcase for Marion County and what we are working on to have on the overpass coming up I-75 northbound. I don't know if you can, Jared's going to try to get it so you can see it really good.
That's great.
So this is what we are, what that is the land,
42nd
that's a
flyover.
42nd Street flyover. It's going to be quite beautiful when it's done, and it's really going to let people know where they are as they're heading north on 75. This has been a combined effort through the Tourist Development Council, or through the Tourist Development Council, and we've got some other things that we'll be working on. We've also got some language that'll be in, that we're working on in our comp plan to try to make sure that we don't have the threat of another superhighway in Marion County. So again, thank you all for being here with us today. And Commissioners, unless you have any other things you'd like to say?
I have one thing.
Sure.
Associated.
Okay.
Okay.
There is a trip that's been planned through the CEP for us to participate in Lexington, Kentucky in April. That I'm planning to go, and I know we were all invited to, and I think that's going to give us an opportunity to see more as we continue to learn more about this process.
Very
I'll
good.
just make a comment if I could.
Sure, Commissioner Moore.
We were the cattle capital of the world when the Spaniards brought over cattle, so I think we are better than Lexington, I'll just say that. We are the horse capital of the world, they are not. So even when we're going up to Lexington, it's not because of that, we just want to see what our competition's doing.
Mine's completely not associated with this.
Okay, so we're going to handle a little business here. Unassociated with this.
Zalek, I
Commissioner Zalek?
No, so associated, I just think we should have our county administrator bring us back recommendations, continue to work with planning and zoning and our land development code so that we can actually get some recommendations that come back to the board that we can take action on, as well as I would still, maybe this board is more apt to look at it, but things like when we had the proposed overlay zone for 475, kind of going up to the horse park, I think we need one there on Highway 40 and Highway 27. So architecturally and those types of things, it blends in and people know as they're entering into what we would consider the horse capital of the world. I think those statements, and what I'm talking about is maybe instead of, and these are just ideas, but maybe instead of our land development code requiring shrubs and bushes, they require 4-board fences and architecture that looks more like a horse farm as people are coming into our community, you know, because I don't know what it's done for our commercial businesses to have, you know, little sets of shrubs out there, but it would look gorgeous if everything, whether it's commercial or not, that our roadways started to have some of that representation in it, more and more so, especially as you go Highway 27 and start crossing past, you know, the city limits and start getting into what Marion County is. And we may even be able to work with the city on some of those to see if they're having any appetite. But I think if we could have a couple overlay zones that come in from an architectural standpoint, we could start to change the way that our community looks from the roadways. I think it's an important aspect to this whole process.
I think, well, and I think staff's already got the point that we're going to be working on all this, and if you want to bring back some of those
I just wanted those
overlay
folks to know that
things.
we need to instruct our county administrator to bring back recommendations that we can, you know, continue to have input from, discussion from, and then actually vote on, so that we're not leaving here without any clear direction.
Well, could I?
Sure, Commissioner
I will
Stone.
say, I have been meeting with staff, and there are some additional language that's going to come forward that's going to add us a little bit more protection in the farmland preservation as we move forward, looking at the EARS report as well. So I appreciate the work that's already been done and what's going to be coming.
Very good. Okay, anything else on this topic? Okay, Commissioner Gold.
Just real quick, I know we talked about a lot of challenges that'd be coming up, and during the last meeting, I kind of played it off in jest about the chair position, but I think 2020 is going to be a pretty big year for us. I know we have a sales tax that's sunsetting. We got a couple weeks or a couple days, I guess, to find out the outcome of what's going to be with the amendment. So when that comes up, I just want to make sure that I'm going to be able to bring up some motions during that year or that fiscal year. So I just wanted to make sure, that my intentions, I don't want to be the chair during the 19 to 20 fiscal period. And if that means that, I don't serve as chair as long as the citizens allow me to be the commissioner up here, I'm fine with that. I was actually teaching I'm teaching a leadership class now, and somebody asked me how long I've been in supervisor or leadership, and I sat there and said, well, it's been almost a quarter decade. So that's pretty good, because I worked for Marion County in one way or another for 34 years. So, but I just know that we're voting, and it may not even matter, but for everybody out there to know, we have something called a sunshine law that doesn't allow us to talk about this in general, so that's why I'm using this time, just so I can speak to the other commissioners. And I have no doubts that I could do it, but I serve for the citizens, as we all do. We all do a great job, and I just wanted to let you all know my intentions now.
But
So I
you can pass
appreciate
the
that.
gavel.
So,
If you're the chair, you can always pass the gavel. Just saying.
Well, there's all kinds of other things
Yes.
too. There's going to be an election year, so anyway. All right, thank you, Commissioner Gold, for making your intentions known. All right, is there any other business that we need to discuss today? All right, with that, we'll be adjourned. Thank you again for being here.